Well, it's been some time since I've been able to sit down and find some time to actually do this. I've had a lot of things going on and been enjoying my life quite a bit.
However, now that the year 2012 has come upon us, there are too many events happening around the world daily. Military, political, and of course financial events to not know what is happening. The resources for information to educate oneself on world events have become so enormous that for one to sit back and not realize the destruction that is taking place right in front of our eyes has become too frustrating for me to watch society so unaware of these events. As an individual, all I can do is supply the message. However, we must stand together to share the message, rising above the situation that is ripping society apart. For if we allow this to continue, the destruction of the way we live will be taken away from us to serve the hands of the elites. This has happened through the annihilation of individuals' capability to see the manipulation, the deception, and the fabrication of fallacies that are put in front of us to distort our views of the situation we live in today. There has been no greater time in history that as a society we have moved closer in sync, and as they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And for this reason, we are losing the support to handle the upset that is coming. This upset will be like on any other. The signals, the transmission, the lines of communications that are open to this event are here. It is only a matter of time before life as we know it will result in the outcome of a new alignment of the world we know today.
The question is, do you know why you are here?
I'm pretty sure I know why I'm here.
You are here because you were sent here. You were told to come here and then you obeyed. But this is not a reason, this is not a why. It is, of course, the way of all things. You see, there is only one constant, one universal. It is the only real truth. Causality. Action, reaction, cause and effect.
So why should I believe your theory?
Because he understands the very simple fact, Judge, that every action has a reaction.
Well, I know in history there was a lot of events that you speak of: the Great Depression, World War II, and of course the Cuban Missile Crisis, where of course Khrushchev himself placed nuclear missiles into Cuba because he felt threatened. But why did he?
America had missiles in Turkey and Italy. And how do you think Russia felt at the time? And I hate to say this, but it kind of ties into the term blowback. And if my listeners know of Ron Paul, he speaks of blowback all the time.
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback.
Because the missiles that were stationed in Italy and Turkey were there before the missiles were stationed in Cuba. So why did Russia decide to place missiles into Cuba?
I think it's pretty obvious. It turns right into the term of blowback. Russia was threatened by America. But of course, Khrushchev and Kennedy came to their senses and they discussed the issue, avoiding World War III. And we have to look at today and understand the causes and effects of the events that are happening in the world economy today, and what can be resolved and what can be done to revitalize the situation.
Increasing protests around the country are a testament to the frustration many Americans share with the lagging economy. Protesters are rightly angry that big corporations and big government are working together to benefit at the expense of everyone else.
In the case of the Occupy Wall Street people, they're blaming capitalism for a consequence that is, in my view, unquestionably a result of what can at best be called crony capitalism.
Well, there's so much frustration in this economy, and so they're looking for somebody to blame. I think there's tremendously good reasons for this resentment, but it's misdirected towards anger at the bankers and anger at the industrialists. But in reality, the recession had many more causes beyond Wall Street and beyond the bankers.
Crony capitalism means that your success as an entrepreneur depends less on how well you meet your customers' needs and more on how well you curry favor from the government. And it's a problem because it means that valuable resources, including the best and brightest minds, are diverted from productive uses towards unproductive, seeking government favors.
Politics is a struggle to get a larger share of the spoils, and when you've got the federal government spending close to $4 trillion a year, people want a piece of those goodies. They want some of that.
You have billions of dollars at stake here. People are making billions of dollars illicitly by using the government. They're not going to stop doing that just because you write a statute.
It's highly unlikely that increasing regulation will lead to less money in government, less business money devoted to government. In fact, it's likely to have the opposite effect. That's what we've seen over the last few decades. As we've seen an increase in regulatory activity, we've seen an increase in companies having to have a Washington office.
There was no substantial deregulation. The idea that we were living in some laissez-faire world in 2008 is absurd.
Any measure that you look at, number of regulators, number of regulatory agencies, number of pages in the Federal Register and the Code of Federal Regulations have all been increasing. The conventional wisdom is that big businesses oppose regulation and consumer groups and environmental groups support regulation to protect the public interest. But I think you'll find that that's a myth.
Government, either overtly or more often covertly, uses its influence, uses its ability to tax and regulate, not with the intention of helping the general public, but with the intention of padding the bottom lines of the favored firms and industries.
It's the government mingling into the capitalist system and trying to decide who to save and who to let fall.
You show me a politician on Capitol Hill, even ones that I agree with, I will show you a self-interested person.
Rent seeking is seeking those excess profits that the government can confer through regulation. And so when businesses know that there's a regulation, or they can even seek out, encourage the government to issue a regulation, it is in their interest to support lawmakers to get the regulation to turn out in a way that they gain the rents at the expense of others.
That's not capitalism. That's an end round around capitalism.
And I think they've got to look to Washington rather than Wall Street. I mean, it's easy for the politicians, and particularly in a presidential election year, to push the blame off on somebody else. You always have to have somebody else to blame.
The only real way a corporate plutocrat can force you to do anything against your will is if that corporate plutocrat has the force of government behind him or her.
More regulation will lead to more rent seeking and more crony capitalism.
Without special protections that can only be provided by an increasingly powerful government, big businesses would have to compete to earn their profits instead of taking them straight from taxpayers. We all agree, businesses should succeed or fail based on the value they provide to their consumers, not based on their ability to influence the political system. And that's what happens in a free market.
And with all this being said, we have the Federal Reserve that continues to work with the banks and the government, creating the manipulation of the United States currency by pumping trillions of dollars into the world economy, placing the burden back onto the American taxpayer.
Each time the federal government increases its spending, 2 years later the economy declines. In fact, on average, for every 1% increase in federal spending, we lose $4,000 in GDP per person. Does stimulus spending work? The data says no.
But yet, for some reason, government tries to still lead the public to believe that stimulus is working. However, just reading the paper today shows a 273,000 person increase in jobs. Last week, the unemployment was 8.5%. This week, it's 8.3%. So for every 0.1%, 125,000 jobs roughly are created. I mean, are people not able to do the math? America will only have to create another 4.9 million jobs to be at the lowest unemployment rate at 4.4%, which was in 2007. But yet there's still over 45 million people on food stamps. How can this be? Well, it's fairly simple, because this all ties into the manipulation to distort the views of individuals who are unable to see through the misleading information that is given to them from the government and the mainstream media, and doesn't allow them to think for themselves. As a result, the government continues to go into debt, creating larger and larger deficits, destroying the world currency, and moving the world and the United States closer to the inevitable economic collapse. For this reason, I have made this video, trying to address you, to signal you, to motivate you in educating yourself and sharing the message, and for society to open their eyes, moving away from egos that have been created through society behavior of not thinking for oneself. This has been the result of corruption, unprincipled and unethical maneuvers brought to you by the elites and the system that has been created to serve the hands of the elites. We must move away from this, and the way of doing this is to share the message.